Hi there, my name's Kristen and I'm the artist of Sweet Enemy Art, and we're in my studio here in Underhill, Vermont during the open studio tour that normally takes place in person and this year has gone to virtual. So I'm going to be sharing a number of work in progress videos, lots of photos, answering questions, things like that during the weekend. And you can follow me on my links down below. All my socials are linked as well as my website. And you can also follow the other artists who are taking part in the Vermont Open Studio Tour. There are quite a number of amazing crafters, artisans, makers of all kinds here in the state, so it's a pretty awesome place to be. And I hope you like what we're all sharing. So thanks for watching, and all the info down below, and we're gonna get to it. All right. So this is a series I just started recently. They are on fluid watercolor paper, easy block, 6 by 8 inch size. And it started because I was doing drawings of these fantastical ravens. I'm rather obsessed with ravens right now. We actually have a nesting pair that have moved into the woods near us, so every morning we get to hear their gronking. And after I did this fellow, figured I would try another rabbit-oriented one, and of course it developed a beak, and then several other sets of eyes, so I was channeling something outrageous here. The working title for this right now over on my Patreon is maybe a Thunderbird. We're still deciding. So what I noticed, of course, after I did these two, is they're both facing in the same direction. So the other day I sat down during another Zoom meeting and thought I would sketch a cat facing in the other opposite direction. But then, of course, looking at it, I realized I have its eyes also pointing to the same right-hand side of the page. So before I start watercoloring, I'm going to just make a little adjustment for that. One of my favorite tools is the eraser stick, and this is a nice small one. You click forward just like you would with a mechanical pencil, and you can get refills pretty easily. We get ours through the drawing board down in Montpelier. And what I like about it is I can just get in there and gently work into just that spot. And then, because it's watercolor paper, I don't want to get my oils from my hands on there too much, so I try to use a dusting brush to get rid of that. Scratch that up there. I don't usually work standing up next to a camera, so this will be a little interesting. And here's a mechanical pencil, and we'll try the eyes looking upwards. I think that could still work. I can adjust it once the paint is on there too. The other erasers that I love are kneaded erasers, which are sort of like putty. This one's a bit old. It's pretty dark gray. I can usually freshen it up and soften it up by kneading it a little bit, thus the name. And I can go in and just lighten an area so that if I do need to make a drastic change with the watercolor lately, the pencil won't give me away. So I'm going to switch over to a fairly good sized brush, and working on a glass table like this, which if you look down below has something that allows me to adjust the angle, I'm working on a tilted surface. So glass of water, palette, things like that want to just slide or roll. Luckily there's a little pencil edge down at the bottom, and I'm using some carpet grip to hold things in place. And with the easel itself, I've got my little jar of water. I'm going to move that carpet grip down here. And then, let's try to cover that light a little bit so I don't blind you. And I'll just set the water up there for now. And I'm trying to use the biggest brush possible to start. It's something I've been pushing myself to do more and more, just to save wear and tear on my really fine brushes, because I will do a whole painting with just a fine brush if that's what I have handy, and that doesn't make them last very long. So the indigo paint I'm using right now is, I believe, Daniel Smith. purchasing a bunch of these from a friend of mine. So Daniel Smith Indigo is this color here. And I'm just going to start in. That's the color I used mainly for those two. Just a lovely color. I don't really have any set plan just yet. So I'm just going to lay in some light color. And one of the things I always like to have on hand, which I didn't grab, is some small piece of rag. Piece of t-shirt, flannel sheet, something like that that's cotton and absorbent. Those are good basics to have. I try not to use paper towels too often just because we try to limit our waste. We live out in the woods. I refuse to have to pay for a trash service, which means we only go to the dump once in a while. And especially right now with the pandemic, that's gotten a little trickier. So the less that I have to throw away, the better. Just going to leave a little bit of indigo here. And I really like this paper. It's affordable, holds up really well. I think it has a partial cotton content, meaning that it can withstand some wear and tear, like with blotting and scrubbing and things like that. Not as much as like Arch's watercolor paper, which is like 100% cotton, but pretty close. One thing I haven't used in a long time, and I'm thinking of starting up again, is masking fluid, because you can now get it in really fine applicators. I just don't do watercolor enough right now to where it would last for me, because it's natural rubber and it has a shelf life. The last time I bought it, I got really excited. I did about 2-3 paintings, and then I set it aside and forgot about it for 2 years, and it was a very sad lump when I went to use it again. So that didn't work so well in my favor. There we go. And the nice thing about working on the block is this right here that you see is the glue edging holding the stack of pages together. So it's like having the paper taped down while I work, because if you look, you can see a little bit, not too bad happening yet because the paper's not really wet, but it's got a little bit of a wave to it. And if I was just painting on the paper as on its own, it would be warping and my colors would puddle in areas where I might not want them to puddle. So. The nice thing about working with a fairly thin wash is I can usually go in and get rid of some of it if I didn't quite like it. I'm going to go in with a slightly punchier blue. I think this is a Prussian blue. Mix a little of that with the indigo just to give it a little bump. Trying to work around some of the whiskers you can see. I'll probably just end up painting over them and then going in with some fine white paint. One of the ways I haven't used in a while that I really liked when I was doing it regularly was using an old-fashioned dip pen and dipping it into very thin white acrylic paint and going in and just drawing all these lovely curlicues and swirls and things of that nature. And it's very satisfying. And this fellow has some fantastical things coming off the top of his head too. Not sure what they are yet, but really thin. It's a pretty big brush, but it does come to a pretty fine point still, which has been nice. And I do try to keep my acrylic brushes and my watercolor brushes completely separate because they do very different things, and acrylic would not do well on a nice soft absorbent brush like this. It would gum it up and pretty much kill the brush right away. Edge forming here that I want to get rid of. And going a little darker. And now for the eyes, I am going to switch back to a lighter brush, or smaller brush. So, this still might not be the finest point, but it's a little better. It's going to take some of that water off of it. There we go. I do love having the eyes rendered pretty early in the piece, just because that's where so much of the personality is for me. Nose. Alright, and so this indigo blue, like I said, I believe it's the Daniel Smith that I'm using. I think I'm actually going to break out my Winsor Newton indigo blue as well and compare the two again. I believe the Winsor Newton one is actually a little deeper and a little more purple like with the others. So I'll pull that out in a little bit. Do a little wet on wet. I feel like I'm still just learning how watercolors work. I don't use them often enough to feel super confident, so a lot of these I like working small, where it's not as much of a loss if I feel like I messed it up. But I'll get there at some point. There's some of my favorite artists, like Emily Hare in the UK, Brian Froud, of course. They use watercolor with such an amazing hand, and that comes from years and years of experience, so I'll be working my way towards that slowly. My problem is sometimes I'll get in a bit of a funk with it, so I'll switch over to another medium that I love, like pen and ink, or jump back into my acrylics, which I'll be showing later, and then I don't give it quite the push that I could have with the watercolor. But then again, sometimes it's really hard to work on something when you're just hitting roadblocks and getting frustrated endlessly. So I think I'm in about the right spot to stop and let some of this dry. And then I can go back in with that just a little bit. Go back in and layer some more colors on and maybe do some lifting too, which I love that technique. I always like that look. It gives you kind of a ghosting effect. Oops. Alright, soften that. Okay, so we're going to leave that there for a little bit. Let my brushes dry and I'll get ready to show you something new in just a moment. Thanks for watching.